Hello, my name is Devin Valencia with BCM Pros. Today I want to talk about ServiceNow BCM, of course, being that we are a ServiceNow implementation partner that specializes in BCM and IRM modules. I feel like it's an appropriate topic. Specifically, what I want to go through are the exercise pieces or activities related to the BCM as a practice, right? And what the tool does to facilitate success in that area, right? What is the approach that ServiceNow takes with supporting these operations, right? What does it look like? What can you do to tailor it to something that works for you, right? And what are kind of the trade-offs there? Also, I should mention, we'll be at the DRI conference in Vegas coming this February. So stop on by if you have any questions, just want to say hi, or enter yourself into a raffle. More on that later. But for now, let's get right into it. All right, so first we'll start off with the BCM workspace. This is predominantly where a lot of your end users will be operating when they're updating their plans or creating BIAs or activating their plans, in fact, and also exercises, which is what we're talking about today. Funny enough, the whole inspiration for this particular video was related to a Reddit question. They wanted to know how loss scenarios tied into exercises, and I'll try to touch on, but I want to kind of keep the length of this video short, and I did divert a little bit here already, so let me try to keep going. Going through the exercise here, there are some fields that are optional, and then there's the one non-optional field, which is the type of exercise. And there is some documentation that I will link in the YouTube description. Just remind myself to do that. And then we'll talk about some of the details here. So when it comes to planning, you have a planned start date, which is again optional. If you have a goal in mind, you can kind of set that, and you could develop some reporting based off that planned start date as a BCM program manager, or not. Whatever, or you just see it in the list view. Then there's plan approvers and result approvers. Essentially, this is just I would call it a placeholder, a place where you can list users that you can later on set up an approval workflow for, or approval flow. It's very easy, very point and click. So, let's say you want to develop an approval flow for after an exercise has been completed. Then you could say, hey, approval flow, go and look at anyone that's in the plan approvers or in the results approvers, field. So there's a couple ways you can work that, but a lot of times, honestly, we don't see these used. So just kind of heads up there, right? Because typically you don't want to get in the way of your process owners actually being engaged with that plan in a meaningful way, which is making they actually care whether the plan is successful because they're exercising it. Now, obviously, there are mandates and policies enforcing that they do exercise it, but you want to make it the least difficult for them as possible, because you have to remember, right? This isn't their main job, right? These are people that are responsible for a process and now have been told they have to develop a contingency plan for the process for X amount of scenarios. So you want to keep the tool out of their way as much as possible. You want to make it so it's supportive, not cumbersome. So going back here, I'll talk about the exercise method. Really, I don't know how else to say this, but there's only one that results in any sort of additional workflow, we'll call it. So simulation, tabletop, and walkthrough. If you're familiar with BCM as a practice, these are all activities that are conducted, within a room, within a physical space. You have this PDF copy of a plan. You're walking through the process. You have the people you need to. It's more of a in-person type of exercise method. So we'll actually go through one. We'll do a tabletop for fun. You can list out your participants as needed, but in this case, we're not going to. Then you have your goals and objectives. I'm going to be honest. If someone wants to kind of tell me what those differences are, I would love to hear that. A lot of times I end up just relabeling these during the implementations. I have my people relabel them. Yeah, it's a strange choice there. So we'll go ahead and submit. Just like with the plans, the first tab we're set to is the overview tab, which gives us the state progress tracker. Then we have the details, which is essentially the form that we just filled out. And we have our exercise method locked down. My exercise. Then you have your assets that you can add ad hoc. You know, I recommend just going right through the plan. It's just, I think it's a lot more straightforward. We're going to use our example plan, which is Acrobat. And these are plans that, as a BCM user, I have access to. I should mention that only plans that I have access to will show up here. And they can be in just about any state besides archived. That's the only state they cannot be in, but they will show up here. So it can be a draft. You can test out your draft plans. And, you know, it follows the same security rules that we see with other areas of the platform, where if I'm not referenced directly on the plan in some fashion, then I don't get to see it. But we'll go ahead and select here. And we'll see that we have our details being added, our assets being added, I should say. And then we'll refresh, and we'll notice that our assets are added, right? And so what's really great is that you can track everything right here, right? Everything's not been recovered, right? Not recovered in this exercise. And so now what we can do, we can click into our plan. Right, we have this is an activated plan, so it's like a representation of the plan that you actually developed. Right, so your exercise contains an activated plan, which is just your plan, essentially. Right, with all of its assets that get brought up to the exercise assets. And then we can go ahead and start the event. Great. So now we have our plan. We have our details. We see that the activated plan has been opened. Work in progress. We can change this however we need to. Now, because this is one of those exercise methods where the process of the exercise is taking place in person, it's, you know, we're not getting as much value from the platform in this arrangement because it's all happening in a room, right? There's not tasks that people are logging in to complete and then update within the time frame they need to. So it's really set up to facilitate or support the in-person exercise methods, but I would say that's about the biggest value it can offer you in that situation. But when we go through a different method, you'll see there's a lot more to it. But at least you have somewhere where you can track and record how long these in-person exercise methods took you. So if we go back over here, right, we see that we have an activated plan. We'll go ahead and say, hey, we'll have our meeting. It could be a day, it could be 2 days. We'll say, great, we finished what we needed to. Oh, actually, let me do this, sorry. I have to say work in progress, then save. Then it populates our actual start date. So before you go into that meeting, make sure you're putting that in there. And you can always update this as needed. It's just a little convenience piece. And then when you're done with your meeting, or your exercise, I should say, you say close complete, and then you give it a time frame here. So before you go into the meeting, you're going to want to make sure that you hit the work or change the state to work in progress. And then we'll go ahead and say, hey, our meeting took us, 2 hours. We'll just say it took us a couple minutes just for fun. Right? It only took us 1 minute and 3 seconds to conduct our exercise. It's a perfect exercise. And then we'll mark it close complete. You could, I would say, typically change close complete and then set the end date as well. But you could do it separately if you need to. Then you'll see everything's grayed out and that we have some metrics, so actual time taken, total effort. All right, so we'll go ahead and mark our exercise or our plan, activated plan, close complete. And then we'll go back to our exercise, which in this case, we can go from up here towards the top left, or we can go down here, hit the little information icon. Takes us to the same thing. And then we'll see, hey, our exercise as a whole is still in progress. So what we're going to want to do is submit for approval. One thing I will call out, another detour, is that typically, I mentioned it in the past, but BCM programs are typically managed by a small, specialized staff of people that delegate a lot of the process out to the process owners for obvious reasons. They have the most awareness or the most intimate awareness of the process. But that's not always the case. What I want to mention here is that a lot of times we don't like to set up a complex approval workflow when it comes to exercises. And typically we only see program managers, BCM program managers, that is, reviewing these exercises to look for anything particular. So one thing that, here's a good example, is that a BCM program manager might see that, the plan would have taken, I don't know, let's just pretend 3 days to finish, right? So it took 3 days to actually go through the exercise successfully or unsuccessfully, which I'll talk about in a second. But the RTO that the process owner established was 2 days. So, and being a process owner, not a BCM expert, they might not catch that when they go to complete their exercise. So I would say that's a really good opportunity for having a very simple approval flow where you have your BCM program managers approving the exercise, right, just for the sake of reviewing. Or you can keep it simpler, right? We've done this in the past as well where, they just submit the exercise. There's no approval required, right, to complete the exercise because it's already done. But, what we see is that the BCM program manager is notified that an exercise has been completed. So, it's really about what the preferred approach is here, but a lot of times it's usually the former where we have the BCM program manager approving these exercises just to ensure that they're being reviewed, in a timely fashion. So that's all I wanted to touch on there. So going back into the actual exercise, now that we have, completed everything we need for our activated plan, and I should also mention that you can have multiple plans on an exercise. So just a heads up. But going back over here, you'll notice now that there are 2 additional fields, right? Actual end and result. And you need these fields to be complete in order to submit this for approval. So what we'll do is provide an actual end, which should reflect the end time that the plan was exercised. And in the past, we've built out automation that just automatically copies the most recent end time from all the activated plans because you can have multiple plans for your exercise. One other thing I should mention is we don't typically see people using multiple plans for the same exercise, but you could. A lot of people like to keep it just 1-to-1, but you definitely could do more than one. You say successful with issues, or unsuccessful. Let's just say ours was unsuccessful. We didn't have the details. And then we'll say recommended improvements, improve details on recovery tasks. Right, and then the cycle starts anew. You go back to your plan, you update it. Right, so tip and trick. Make sure you save before you hit the submit for approval. I mean, in the past, we've built out so that you don't have to do that. You can just hit submit for approval, but This is just the out-of-box environment, so you can get a good feel for things. Great. So we're looking at the exercise still, and it's pending approval. So as a BCM user, I can't do anything. I can say I go to the approval levels, give that a second here. Approvals, let that run through. And we'll go back in as the BCM manager to make our approval. Okay. And so now we will look to see that we have our approval levels, just a way of grouping or saying who is supposed to be approving it next, essentially, or what group of people are responsible for the approval process. Now we see that we have BCM managers that are requested. All right. And then if I was a BCM manager, which I will go in and log in as and show you what it looks like. Okay, so right now I'm logged in as a BCM manager or BCM program manager. I use the word interchangeably. And then we are going to our pending approval and we're just checking it out. So we have our Reddit question. And a lot of times we do see the request to have out or have an email notification sent out to those who are requiring approval. And out of box, there actually is one that does get sent out, but it's very, very basic. So my recommendation is to always kind of improve upon that. You know, after we get MVP stood up, there's always ways to improve the process. So I am a BCM manager. I say, hey, you know, everything looks good. I looked at the activated plan. Everything looks great. Oh no, it was unsuccessful. You know, essentially as a BCM manager, when you're looking to approve, you know, an exercise, you're going to want to make sure that it just has all the details you need to be able to do that, right? And not necessarily that it's a successful exercise, but that you have everything you need to say, hey, you know, this was a completed exercise. All right, so when we're logged in as a BCM manager, we'll go in and we can say, hey, we like the details, good details, good stuff. One thing, you know, and this is kind of why I'm not crazy about having an approval process on exercises, is that from a practice standpoint of view, I'm not sure it makes a lot of sense to reject an exercise, right? It's not so much that you want to reject an exercise, because then you have to reorganize it and get everyone in the same room again. But I think that, you know, you should still be able to provide feedback as needed and on a timely basis. So there are better ways to handle this process from a practice standpoint, but I always like to call it out. I think it's more of a preference thing on my side. But so again, you know, my recommendation is, you know, we're not approving this exercise on the basis of its success or not. What we're doing is we're approving it on its completeness or not. And so if we feel like it's been completed as a BCM manager or BCM program manager, you can change the state to approved and hit save. Great. And then when we go to the exercise, we'll see it's approved. So it's just something for the archives. And, you know, now we have some evidence, you know, of how successful this plan is. And then there are details related to it as well, right? We see the actual start and end. So it gives us a general time frame. And then you can actually dig into the activated plan to say, hey, this is how long it took, you know, for all the tasks. We have our total effort, our actual time taken. And this is pretty much how it goes for all tabletop simulation or walkthrough type methods. You know, because they're all very much in person, it relies that, you know, this is more of a record keeping system in that sense than it is something that's more functional like a ITSM system. So from here, I want to talk about, you know, a more functional method of managing your plans exercises through the functional exercise method. To the exercise itself. To kind of answer that last question, the question that kind of inspired this whole video is, how do law scenarios tie into the um, the exercise? Uh, you know, you're not, and we've had this issue before in the past, and we've resolved it through some custom tailoring of the solution. So in the past, when we want BCM users to only test for a particular scenario, or if BCM users or process owners, let's call them process owners, are only ready to exercise or only have the resources ready to exercise for a particular law scenario and not all law scenarios. Right now, there's really no out of box method to isolate that. So, whenever you go to exercise a plan, you're exercising it for all law scenarios associated with that plan. So if we go back into the plan itself, we'll go look at it. Let's go look at our plan over here. There we have our recovery tasks. Right. In our case, we don't have loss of application. So when you go to exercise plan, you are testing for every law scenario in that plan. And then, what you could do, in the past we've done this before, but you can build out a system or an enhancement that allows for you to select which law scenarios you want to really test for, right? Because when you think about law scenarios from the tools perspective, say, hey, we have a loss of application in this case. You have a recovery strategy that's set up for a particular scenario as it relates to the application, right? So is there a loss of application due to a fire? It's a loss of application due to water, right? So, you can develop these recovery strategies to, mitigate or restore services in the event of one of these issues. So going back into the exercises, I want to talk about the last exercise method, which is functional. So I think functional has the most to offer in terms of the tool when it comes to exercises. So I'll talk about that right now. So we'll say functional exercise of plan A. We'll just say it. And we want to keep the exercise type or event type as exercise. A lot of times we'll lock that down, but so you can't accidentally change it when you go to create an exercise. I'm going to say functional, right? And we'll just kind of save. Cool. We'll go ahead and tie our plan in, which is the Acrobat plan. Then we'll let it load, make sure our assets come in. All right, we have our assets in here. Now, if you have the Everbridge integration, which we'll be doing videos on in the future, then you can actually tie or set up emergency notifications related to your exercises and events, activations. But right now we're going to ignore that because not the focus of the video today. But what you'll notice is that we have these recovery tasks, right? So they're all associated with the plan. Now, in the past, when we have built out systems that allow for you to isolate, hey, which law scenarios do you want to test this plan out for? You can do so, and then you would only see so many recovery tasks. But that does introduce a lot of complexity to this process that I don't advise, but it is possible. So anyways, we'll go ahead and start our event, and then we'll go into the plan, and then we'll put this work in progress. This is another area for automation that I recommend. When you go to activate your exercise, we set up so that it puts the activated plan already work in progress. All right. And so what we'll do now is track these events, and we'll show a little bit of a better layout here. Give me 1 second. All right. So we'll see here that we are tracking our events or our event tasks for this exercise. We have 4 event tasks, and then we have the details here. They're very limited, right? We're just showing this for example. So I'll show what it looks like from a recovery task perspective. So when you go in to the platform as a recovery task member, right? These are users who have been assigned recovery tasks based on what was set up in the plan. You'll notice that it's very simple, right? So they don't have to go into the BCM workspace. They just log into the platform. As long as they're set up with the right roles, then they can go directly to the menu and start working on their task. So I'm going to show you what that looks like. So I'm logged in as a recovery team member. And then all I type in is my recovery tasks under self-service. All right, and you'll see that we are looking at our first task. So what I'm going to do is actually pause and go back to the plan so you can see what those recovery tasks looks like. Now that we're on the plan, we'll see that there are 2 recovery tasks that have been set up. And these recovery tasks have this recovery team assigned to it. And then that recovery team, again, based on what we have set up in the plan, is set up so that this is our user, BCM recovery team member, and that this is a group. So you can have one or the other. You don't need both, right? So if you have a group in mind, then you can just put that in there. Or if you have someone specific, you can add them here as well. So let's go back to being a recovery team member. So back as a recovery team member, I'm going to go ahead and click into my task. Say, hey, these are all the impacted assets. It's just like a task that you would see with ITSM. You could change what properties are showing here as well. And then most importantly, right, you have your details. So the contents is what the recovery task person is looking for, right? So what am I supposed to be doing with this task? And there's a couple ways to show this so it's not as locked down, but I'll go ahead and put it work in progress. And what we've done in the past is whenever someone puts a recovery task to work in progress, it automatically makes them the assigned to person. Out of box, it doesn't do that, but that's very straightforward to set up. But what it does do out of box is it shows you the actual start time. So we'll let this sit here for a second so we have some time to show. And then we'll be right back when we have a little bit of time. All right, so some time has passed, so we'll go ahead and mark this as close complete. And then just different behavior based on, whether that task is completed or not, but we won't go into that today. And then we'll go back into our BCM user. Cool. So from our exercise, we can actually see how long it's taking in real time, each recovery task to be complete. So we have an actual start, we have an actual end, we have the actual time taken. There's some other properties we can add duration, right, which is a separate property, but actual time taken actually fulfills that detail, that insight. So it gives us a lot of information that we can use in real time. This is a really small recovery or DRP here, but in the event you have 50 or so tasks, which you'll likely have in a lot of cases, you can see how it's updating in real time, and you don't have to be in the same room to get these tasks done, right? You can have your users log in and complete the tasks just like they would in incident. So much like the previous, you put a work in progress, you do your thing. I did my task. Then you close complete. Now, when we're back into the activated plan, you'll see that it's automatically marked close complete, right? You'll see that our tasks have been closed completed. And you can actually go into the details. You can see, hey, it took 3 minutes and 27 seconds and 11 minutes and 58 seconds for the actual time taken. And then you have the start and end. Now, what's really interesting about this is, and this is why we have two separate, you might be asking yourself, why is the actual time taken different than the total effort? And I'll tell you why. Viewer. The the actual time taken is the moment that the exercise is started until the moment it ends, whereas the total effort is a reflection of the total duration of all the task times. So essentially, we could boil it down to is actual time taken is start to finish. When does this exercise start? When does this activated plan start? When it actually ends, and total effort. How long did all the tasks take me? So you'll see the actual time kind of includes that in between task time, right? How long does it take for people to pick up the task that they need to work on? So that's the way I like to look at it. Hopefully that made sense. But if you have any questions, please shoot me an email or a question. Or I'm always on LinkedIn. So going back into the exercise, right? We see that a lot of what we had to do with the other exercise methods has been automated. So we'll go back to the exercise, which contains our activated plan. And we'll say, hey, we were successful, right? Again, the actual end should boil up out of box. It does not. I say should out of my own personal recommendation. Not that it's supposed to work like that out of box, but we often build that piece out. And we'll say that we were successful. Hurrah! We'll submit I always forget to save. We'll submit our plan or our exercise, sorry. And then we'll see that, hey, we have someone that's looking at it to approve. Great. And then we have, the approval request here. And I'm just going to go, I'm logged in as the admin, so I'm going to go and approve it. And that's it. It's very simple, honestly. Approved. So, you have your 3 exercise methods, which are in-person, traditional ways of conducting these exercises. And you can track a lot of the details you need to in the system, right? So the system will kind of, even if you're not using it to manage your recovery tasks in the event of an exercise, you still can use it for analytics, right? You're capturing that data, you're comparing it to the plan, but you get a lot more value out of it using the functional exercise method. That way, you're not restricted to, being in the same room, having to just kind of wait out these things. It's a lot more, I would say, supportive of the exercise process, right? I also think it's a lot more in line with what you can expect in the event of a crisis, right? So you're not always going to be in the same room if something goes wrong, right? If a service is disrupted, you need people to be able to act on their own in this autonomous way, but still in a guided fashion, right? You're supposed to do this after that, or you're supposed to do this alongside with that. And so those are kind of what the plan sets up and when you set up those recovery tasks. So I hope that was helpful. Again, we'll be at DRI. So if you have any questions, shoot us an email, stop by. We'll be around, and we'll see you soon. Thanks all.